-1 resignation, 4 part-time stipends, and an employee retention bonus. May I have a motion?
I'd like to move it.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? We're out of closed session. Now we need to certify that closed
I
session.
certify.
I certify.
I certify.
I certify. And next we need to have an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approving the agenda as presented. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, okay, would you join me please in a moment of silence? Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very good. All right. So we're moving into our consent agenda. I have a motion to approve our personnel agenda.
So move.
Second.
A motion and a second for the approval of our personnel agenda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now, we need approval of our minutes from the June 8th meeting, 2026.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sorry. Any discussion on that first? Oh, we're good? Okay, good.
No.
All right, so now we're at the approving minutes for our
Wait, did we vote on that?
Yeah, we
Okay.
did.
Did we
Backwards.
vote on
backwards.
it? Okay.
Approval of minutes from our June 9th school board governance training.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now we have an information agenda, and we have Mr. Trump, year-end finance report. Sir?
So welcome to our FY26 closeout meeting. There we go. Here we go. The presentation you have in board docs is very similar to this one. It is exactly the same up until the budget updates because the legislature decided to do some stuff over the weekend. So I have some updated slides at the very end that we'll get to. You can follow along on your screens as well if you like. On the agenda, first we'll cover some of our capital needs and close on year-end projects, end of year revenue changes and some remaining projections because state revenue can be wonky that way. We also have projected balances by expenditure category. And I'll talk about more about one of your other action items at that point. State funds carry forward, Virginia State Code information updates, and FY27 budget updates to come. So first, we usually have to take some time at the end of each year to kind of review some of the capital projects going on at the end of the school year and things we're working on currently. As we close FY26, there's still a few projects that are going to be primary to our focus. The first one, we've completed this one as of today, I believe, cutting 2 checks for the purchase of 2 school buses that were in the initial FY26 budget and a 3rd school bus that we used from the state carry forward funds to support. We know as we're waiting on the final state budget funding, we have 2 buses in the budget for next year originally. One reason why we pushed to do this now is to give us some flexibility. If we needed to remove one of those budgets, we could still remain on essentially 2-a-year cycle over this average. We don't like to get too far ahead of things. Yes, sir.
This stuff can it be just encumbered or does it have to be completed by?
It depends on what we're working with. Completed by June 30th is the vast majority of things. Some projects, some grant funds allow you to encumber and utilize them in there, but really for expenditures to count by the end of the end of fiscal year, it should be received, item received by June 23rd.
So like a school bus?
Correct.
And they're pretty good with Tuesday morning. Hey, can I get a bus by Friday?
They're not that good about that, but we've had these purchase orders out since April and May.
Okay, so things are working.
Yes, it is.
Awaiting approval and now it's okay.
Yeah, this was much more about just waiting to say like, okay, we've ordered these buses, let's wait till they come in And usually we don't get the invoice till they're on site and we're kind of going through the title paperwork. So we have those, they are being paid, that is being completed by June 30th. Additionally, we are also.
What about the buses?
Oh, bad.
Did I see, I feel like I saw this somewhere.
Yes.
Bluebird? Are you getting
Yes.
Bluebird?
Yep, they have a cooperative contract for most of the buses we've worked through, make procurement support. They've been a good vendor for us recently. The second thing, a major project is closing out all-in expenditures. That was over $700,000 awarded to us in FY24 that had to be spent by June 30th, 2026. We're coming up on that deadline very quickly. This really funded a lot of good work for us with after-school tutors, training for staff, day tutors for students. And it also funded a lot of materials and supplies. So all of the payroll expenses have been completed. We have received the items for the majority of the high quality instructional materials, but those came at a bit of a discount. So we have about another $1,000 in another order that will be paid by the end of this week as well. But that is a good thing. They have been stressing over and over again, not encumbered, not delivered, waiting on invoice. They want a check dated before June 30th for all in. And so we have that and we'll be easily meeting that timeline. Next, security grant installations and reimbursements. Mr. Lynch, this is usually his area in most of these things. The security grant, we received our $250,000 grant this year with the 62.5 local match requirement. The final projects for that are being installed and occurring in all of our schools. And are mostly on the way out as well. I believe those checks will be cut this week as well. Prepare for those vendors. And finally, the last major detail, retention bonus distribution. As I was, shared before, we estimate for about $428,000 going to our staff at retention bonus, and that will be going out to employees at the June 30th paycheck. So for a quick review of the major revenue changes, this is just kind of all the different moving pieces we've been tracking throughout the year. These are, well, not all of them, these are the major ones. Sales tax projections for a fiscal year run from September 1st to August 31st for school districts. So we, at this point, tracking regular trends for how we accrue, are expecting about $82,000 more than what we budgeted for by the end of this fiscal year for sales tax, so that's very useful. State funds, due to reduced ADM, our projected state funding from the beginning of the year dropped about $184,018. That came with a local requirement drop of $138,028. You'll see later on that that's not where it really lands on either of those pieces. Because the bonus wasn't included in our beginning of school year funding calculations, I kind of wanted to separate those two things, because if you look at our calc tool from last year's budget to close out of this year, it shows only about $11,000 lost in state funds and only about, $20,000-$30,000 left in reduced in local match. It's because a lot of that difference that we lost due to ADM just came right back to us as funding for the bonus. Security grant, we did actually have significantly more security grant expenditures in this fiscal year than we did last year, because last year's security grant, we got an extension from DOE to carry into FY26. So we really have 2 years worth of $250,000 grants happening in this year. So that's a major revenue shift with the track. DCGS grants, we did have some delays in filling those positions. That means we're not spending as much for those employees. It also means we're not getting quite as much revenue back because we're not following reimbursements. We did carry forward $476,117 in state funds due to year-end balances at the end of FY25. And I'll be referencing a number very close to that for FY26 and explain why it's a good thing. And also we had the USAC grant for cybersecurity infrastructure that we were able to take advantage of this last fall. These are the major revenue changes in the budget adoptions. Just going to make sure you have an idea of all the different major players and changes we've seen. So on this table, I have our projected unexpended state funds by area. I reference state funds a lot because all of our local our operating funds are a combination of state and local funds. We only get a certain amount of state funds, but the locality is required to give us a certain amount by looking at required local effort and match. So when we look at our end of year operating expenditures, what we do is we look at how much we spent overall. And then we consider if we had this much total, we spent just up to the line. So we hit that minimum spending at the state level, at the local level. Anything beyond that in our savings becomes what we consider our state savings after that portion. So really, because we're appropriated at that minimum required local effort and match, anything unspent to keep the state funds, we have to consider the locality spending at just that required local effort and match, at least hitting it. So instruction, we project to have unexpended just about $300,000, $289,120. And we also have added a percentage of the original appropriation there for your reference. You can see how closely we thread this at times. Admin, attendance, and health is higher than usual. When we have staff change, that generates some savings if you have 10 years of experience. Transportation is $81,745.81. Maintenance projecting about $209,000. Part of that is due to just some of the year-end projects just not having quite the same amount of time, or also just need to be cautious with end of year funding. What we can get done, what we should get done, and have those pieces set. Technology, $51,054.23. This is by area in our appropriated budget. The thing that those don't take into account, and some of the reasons why those larger numbers seem large, is that that's how much we were appropriated and are allowed to spend, but we have to make sure it balances revenue. So we balance that against some projected changes. That state revenue total, I referenced about how much we need to save from that total. Add the sales tax that's going to be over budget. Then we also have to remember that, at the locality, we may have been appropriated $7.48 million. We would like to, as they give us the full required local effort and match, we want to make sure we're not having to exceed it if it drops to a lower number. So that's $68,356 that we would not consider savings from state funds because it's not be captured in that minimum required local effort. And then we have the reduced local effort as well. Less the reduced RLM is the bottom one, the minus 33.79. The projected local revenue account shortfall, those are our miscellaneous funds in some areas. So that's retiree balances. If someone shifts from one plan to another, we're not bringing in as much money from retirees who are paying for their health insurance through us. And then things like rebates and refunds, which we have to project year to year, and some other pieces. One major player in that actually is E-rate. E-rate was usually about $15,000 a year. It's federal funding for telecommunications. With the switch to River Street from TDS, it used to be that we paid a larger amount for our internet service, and then we got the E-rate benefit back to us as a separate check. The way River Street has set it up is that we actually just pay a reduced rate up front. So while we're not getting that's revenue we didn't capture, but it also is savings we did capture elsewhere in expenditures. It's just looking at how all the money, balancing expenditures against revenue. Our projected unexpended state funds at this time are about $475,000, which sounds like a whole lot of money when we talk about it that way. With a $26 million budget, looking at the amount of state funds are appropriated, it's 2.94% of just the state funds. That's a pretty narrow margin to hold on to. We know it's probably not going to be that exact number when we close, but that's our projection at this point. So just some of the state carry forward code references. The Code of Virginia requires that school divisions return unexpended state funds to the Commonwealth at the close of each fiscal year. That's adopted into regular state code. However, as has been the practice for the state for the last, actually I haven't gone back to see when they started doing it this way, but it's been a recurring standard for them. When the new state budget comes out, chapter 725, that's the generated code they use for the state budget, they generally override this code section. And they say that if you meet your required local effort and match, the locality gives you the money you need just to meet that minimum requirement, you can carry over into the following fiscal year any remaining state direct aid public education fund balances available to help minimize. And you can make that to minimize revenue adjustments in the future. I'll use sales tax as an example of this. Sales tax, since we don't know the final revenue for sales tax until August, say if we somehow miraculously spent expenditures and revenues to the penny as of June 30th, and sales tax came in July and August higher, we'd have leftover funds we didn't account for. So what they do is they just say, digital locality give you all the money that we said they need to give you to keep the state money. If you can verify you did that through your audit and through other practices, they let you keep the remaining difference. This is similar to how textbook funds work. We have state and local component for textbook funds at the end of the year. Once again, those will be appropriated following year. And we have done that just through your appropriations requests. That's because it's a separate delineated item. It's easier to tie in and say, well, we had this much money, we received this much money, we spent this much money, this is how much money we carry forward. It's usually a bit of a faster process, but it really is essentially the same thing. We say we got this much money from the state, how much did we spend? Everything else gets kept up to that local match and the other requirements. The key takeaway I have, like if we talk about ROE, RLM, L in the middle is local. There is a local component. We have to show a certain amount of financial effort, and we have to match certain funding standards to make sure we can keep our money. The difficulty of being budgeted at ROE, RLM is that it basically just narrows a band that we have to target, we have to try to hit with our expenditures at the end of the year. It means that in the budgeting process, we really have to be very cautious with what we commit to in the budget, that you can't have be slightly fungible, because when that local requirement drops or state funding drops, we have to make sure we can respond to it because we don't have a lot of wiggle room to work with. The benefit is though, as I said, wanted you all to try to remember that carry forward number we brought forward from the end of last year, about $476,000. We're projecting $475,000 as our savings this year. And the target really is, that means if those numbers stay right about there, it basically means we spent every penny and we got every penny we could for revenue in this fiscal year. Because we had some savings left over and we can kind of just roll that savings forward continually to give us that small buffer for really bad odd years. Just make sure we're following state code, meeting your obligations, but also trying to be as fiscally responsible as we can with state and local money. So as I say, the big difference here, the way it used to work is that at the end of the year, we used to be appropriated 23-24, we were appropriated almost $800,000 more than the required local effort and match. Our funding has gone up from the county each of these last 3 years. That's a hard thing for them to do year over year. I want to acknowledge that. One of the reasons it hasn't been lower probably is because the required local effort and match has in 24-25 took a massive jump when the state started investing more in at-risk education and some of these other specialized programs that do directly benefit us a lot. So we've been getting a lot of state money, but it has meant, when we say we're being budgeted close to required local effort and match, I don't want that to be seen as something negative towards the county because you need to see where that is and how much it's changed. I think we could still operate a little bit better and be even more effective with more funds above that number, which is why we asked for a slight increase above that number in this last budget cycle. But we want to recognize that this is where we're ending up each year. We're trying to thread that needle of having those two things match up nearly equally. In other situations, in years like this, when we had savings at the end of the year, it was not state funds left over. We could say we spent all the state funds and then we spent the local funds plus a little bit over the minimum, and the county could take that money back and decide to give it back to us or not. We're no longer in that position because we have to meet that local effort and match at least. And because the goal is to only meet that local effort and match, we have to spend cautiously to leave a buffer, and it means that buffer is now state funds and not local. So our next steps, we have our carry forward resolution. It's something we did for we did last year. We're planning to follow pretty similar steps. First, we're going to prepare a resolution for FY26 to FY27. We have a template we used last year that was vetted by Sand Anderson staff, our council. It might be one or two items on it, make sure it's where we want it to be for this next year. We'll share it with county finance for their feedback prior to their meeting in July, and prior to, ideally, hopefully get some feedback prior to our meeting in July. Because at the July school board meeting, I'll present that to you all for approval, present to the board of supervisors. And then at the end of July, hopefully pass it on for consideration to them as well. Okay. Any questions on any of those closeout items before we move on to budget updates? I know everyone's so excited. Okay. So moving on to budget updates. This got an overhaul this morning, so this is where this no longer aligns with your presentations on board docs. Over the weekend, budget conferees from the House and Senate reached agreement on budget amendments for the 27-28 biennium. It's been a long time coming, but they got something. And I had not seen any notes about votes this morning yet. I believe the Senate started meeting at 10 a.m. The House should have started right when we did, around 2 o'clock. So here's the summary of the major items. So for compensation supplement, this is the biggest change and a major driver. The compensation supplement in the joint budget of the conferees is at 4% for teachers, or for all SOQ staff. That's 2 times the original governor's budget. The House, when they released their amendments in March, were at 2% still. The Senate was at 3% in March. In the last week or so, as they started presenting kind of their dueling proposals coming up to this last weekend, the House had moved to 3% and the Senate moved to 4%. And that was the first inkling we got that was a possibility. And now look, they've landed on 4%. So that literally doubles the amount of state money and local match money required to give that 4% bonus to staff, or 4% increase to staff. Sales tax and basic aid adjustments. The governor had directed Treasury staff to provide up to reforecast some revenue projections, sales tax projections, and that led to us having recasted sales tax projections in the state budget. That adds funding to schools. It means we get more in sales tax. However, in state funding formulas, sales tax offsets the total basic aid contribution that they think your school district needs. And it effectively lowers the basic aid contribution. I'll show you that on the slide. So what happens, they say if they calculate that we need $10 million in basic aid based on their formulas per pupil, and sales tax is $1 million projected, that means the $9 million remaining is what gets split between the locality and the state. So it's kind of, I think, sometimes when they talk about sales tax going up, they then reforecast other pieces down. Special education add-on was something that had been tackled in both budgets, I believe, at different values. The total change on it was actually higher than either legislative body had proposed earlier. Again, they took a big swing at special education, the way they do the compensation supplements, and they more than doubled the original funding. Infrastructure and operations increase. In the House budget, there was a major flexible funding line that was supposed to operate similar to all in. You can carry forward year over year. They seem to have scrapped that. What it looks like they replaced is this is a 1 year 1.22 times increase over the budget figures. They put a flat $60 million extra in there. But it's only for a 1 year project. So really it does kind of something we have to be careful with budgeting going forward when we get the final calculation of that. But infrastructure operations is one of our most flexible funding sources. 40% of it has to be spent on major capital, major upgrade projects. The rest can be used for operational needs of the division. So that's where transportation is covered by that. And I will say 2 to 3 school buses more than exceeds that 40% every year. So that's a major driver for that. It's a little bit more flexibility in those areas. Once again, this is one-time funding only. In the biennial budget, they have no money added to this for FY 28, 60 million extra added for this year. School breakfast funding, not really a major net effect on our operating budget, but they are increasing that almost twofold. There's also language in that I know we discussed at the last board meeting, changing our ISP, that percentage for claiming for CEP funds and kind of resetting that cycle. I had not seen this before, but DOE, there's language in a companion bill directing DOE to explore statewide CEP. So that could have a major effect on our school breakfast funding too, because it might no longer be just our percentage. It may be a statewide percentage driving our reimbursement rates going forward. At-risk add-on was another, it's a large project, which is why it's also split funded between the general fund and lottery funds. The general fund portion was increased minimally, 1.018 times increase. That still nets us about $30,000 in new state funding. So that very small multiplier can lead to a larger increase for us. Okay. So really nearly all areas with increased state funding also have required local effort and match components. This is one thing that was a big difference from some of the other proposals. And with the size of some of these impacts, it is projected to be substantial. The school breakfast supplement had no local match. Every other one I talked about, besides sales tax. Sales tax has required local applications, but doesn't have everything affects that local match in some way or another. So this table shows what my projection for what this could look like. Basic aid actually reduces about 15,000 at the state level and about 10,000 at the local level. That's because of that sales tax offset. Sales tax goes up 31,000. State basic aid funding goes down almost equivalent. Sometimes there's formulas that can adjust that. The SPED add-on is anticipated to add almost $100,000 in state funding and require about $63,000 in local funding. At risk from the general fund adds about 26,000 state and about 17,000 local. The compensation supplement, this is the one that I think is easiest to project because it was 2% before and now they moved it to 4%. If you double it, it makes a lot of sense. That looks what they did as well. And infrastructure operations is approximately $80,000 from the state with approximately $52,000 from the locality. Those total increases are not on the state side. That's more closely aligned with our March budget. At $232,543.42, that's the increase of the required local effort and match increase from the calc tool, which is based on the governor's budget. The locality, when the county has advertised their local budget, they've been advertising a higher required local effort and match than what was in the calc tool because they wanted to be realistic moving closer. So we actually used the House amendments that were released earlier in the year. That still leaves us with a new projected required local effort and match overall of $8,067,913. And a change to the Amelia County budget of $175,598 that we'll be asking for. We potentially may be asking for. I have communicated with this. I spoke with Ms. Pillar, the new finance director of the county, just before this meeting, just to give them a heads up this information will be coming because I know they have had the budget advertisement in the public hearing just last week. And then they will also be voting on it, I believe, on Wednesday. And this is a change that we were really hoping we'd have information on previously. I'll also stress at this point that these are just projections based on my calculations. So there may be nuances and factors that I don't have exactly right. I've been pretty close in projections in the past, but in this case, we will not be revising our budget. We're not going to be driving headlong into things. We're not going to be asking anything of the Board of Supervisors until we have definitive information from the Department of Ed. Yes.
And that coming when?
I believe they have, by state code, they have 10 days Dr. Sharp, I think that's one reason.
That's what I didn't go back and look, but that's what I recall.
Usually it's about within 10 days of having the budget, they have to release a couch rule. I will say they've had this information for they've had the information for quite some time. The things that changed are not massive. And I will say the new DOE leadership for finance and budget has been awesome in getting things out as quickly as they can. I would not be surprised if something is out this Thursday with the regular slate of communication, but it could go into next week. Yeah. But ideally, we'll have this sooner than later because our goal would be, as going forward, to get that total and be presenting a revised budget to the school board and to the county thereafter. So really, that's our next timelines. House and Senate are reconvening today. Reconvening, taking votes. We should know budget up or down as of today. After that, the budget does have to go to the governor for approval. From reading news reports, she's been more involved in some of the legislative projections, proposal they've had. So hopefully, this will be a fairly smooth process from here on out until the 30th of a week. And then once they have the governor's final approval, we'll get the capital after that. And then we'll have those budget proposals updated for you all. That's all I have.
A lot of work. Thank you so
Appreciate the
much.
update.
So the next steps will be, assuming the calc tool comes out expeditiously, revising our budget, bringing it to you at the July meeting for your approval, and then going to the Board of Supervisors in July for the amendment, because then we have to get new contracts out to staff because we budgeted on a very low 2%, and the state is at 4%. I would imagine the Board of Supervisors are also going to be faced with something similar with those on the compensation board, because the budget proposed an increase also for compensation board employees, in the state. So we won't be the only entity coming back, but July 1st is our 12-month employees start the new fiscal year, July 1st.
So once we get the new, we'll be updating a lot of things in terms of the budget, the salary scales, we'll get an update. All the compensation supplement information does say it would be effective July 1 of this year. So we'll probably have on the payroll side, once we get new contracts updated and amendments drawn up, we'll have to do some retroactive pay adjustments. But ideally, we'll have this sewn up and finished in time to make sure that our 10-month staff start off with the correct total from the from the get-go. But that will
should only impact our 12-month employees.
So we approve at our July meeting, and then it goes to Board of Supervisors. Do they have a time frame for when they have to approve?
I'm not.
This is first we come is that their budget is going to be approved as of when they take a vote on it, which I believe should be happening this Wednesday. So if they move and act on it, they'll move on and be done Wednesday. In terms of these final figures, and generally what we've done is we will, similar to the year when our ADM was part of the debate, was we reported to the board regularly and we projected it a bit lower. It was higher than what the state said it would be, but it was a little bit lower than what we thought it would be. We monitored it, and they updated through the year. We'll have an appropriation to start the year. The only concern will be is making sure that we have to certify we have appropriate funding appropriated to cover required local effort and match. If we're budgeting at the projection they have for ADM and not lower, having a relatively expedient appropriation from the county would be the best thing for us. And we'll cross that bridge and look more into that as it comes. But it would just have to be handled as similar to a grant appropriation. We'd say, okay, we know what this budget is. We're requesting you appropriate another this much money to us. We'll have to, in presenting our budget, we'd really be presenting to them, we're revising our budget for this reason. it results in the appropriation of updated figures in these areas from our budget as presented, including a locality increase. And then they would just have to take that up like any other appropriation.
All right. Guess that leads us to our next
It's not Mr. Trump.
approval for budget transfer. This is an action item.
Yes, it is. Just taking its time when the documents show up.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, I'm sorry, board docs is being rough today.
It is. There we go. So what we're asking for from you all this evening is a transfer of appropriations. When it comes to our funding, as finance director, I am allowed to move funds within an area of the budget. So if we have, savings at the high school and we need more money at the elementary school, I can move funds between accounts between those two schools because they're both in the instructional category. If we're asking to transfer funds between areas, like from instruction to maintenance or from instruction to technology, that requires school board approval. If I want to move funds from textbook fund into the operating fund, those larger numbered funds, that takes both school board and board of supervisors approval. We are at the lowest tier of that, or at the second lowest tier of that, where simply we're transferring funds between instruction to other areas. These transfers were actually accounted for in in the tables presented. Just because of the extra, this is to make sure we have the funds to continue paying our bus drivers through the end of July, and have the school buses accounted for with any one individual area going into a negative on its budget. So this is just balancing the scales a little bit as we are all the way out the door. So we're asking for 100,000 to be transferred from instruction to transportation expenditures and 50,000 to be transferred from instruction over to technology as well.
And we permit the transfers as listed.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any discussion? We're good with this. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Very good. All right. And now we're up to the point where we ask board members, do you have reports since our last,
You mean since 2 weeks ago?
since 2 weeks ago? Anything happening exciting?
No.
No. Very good.
No.
That's a good thing.
I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
No. Don't we have
No, that was rude.
that was what?
Remove.
Remove.
It was removed. Oh,
Not needed.
hallelujah. Okay, move for adjournment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned, folks. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Trump, for all your efforts. Dr. Wheeler, appreciate it.
All right, get my